Theirs was a love story that was never meant to be. From the outside, they looked like an ordinary couple, Lisa and Damien. She was devoted, hopelessly in love, willing to do anything for the man she adored. But Damien, he never loved her. His affection was an illusion, a cruel facade hiding the darkness beneath. Lisa met Damien at a coffee shop, and for her it was love at first sight. His confidence, his charm, the way he carried himself, it was intoxicating. She was drawn to him like a moth to a flame, blind to the danger that lurked behind his smirk. Damien, on the other hand, saw something different in Lisa: vulnerability. She was sweet, naive, desperate for love. He knew she would be easy to manipulate. From the beginning, their relationship was a battlefield, though Lisa refused to see it. Damien was cold, distant, sometimes cruel. He ignored her texts for days, flirted openly with other women, and belittled her in front of friends. Yet, whenever she tried to leave, he would pull her back with a hollow apology, a fleeting moment of tenderness, just enough to keep her hanging on. Lisa's friends warned her. Her family begged her to walk away, but she wouldn't listen. She convinced herself that if she just loved him enough, if she gave more, sacrificed more, he would change. She held on to the dream that one day he would see her the way she saw him. But Damien had no intention of changing. And as the months turned into years, his cruelty only grew worse. He controlled every aspect of her life: what she wore, where she went, who she spoke to. He drained her bank account, made her question her own worth, and shattered every ounce of confidence she had. Then came the bruises. At first, they were small, easily hidden, but soon they became impossible to ignore. Lisa made excuses, blamed herself, told herself it was just stress, that he didn't mean it, until one night when everything changed. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. Lisa had cooked his favorite meal, hoping to please him. But Damien came home drunk and angry. He accused her of things she hadn't done, shouted vile insults, and when she tried to defend herself, he hit her harder than ever before. She fell to the floor, her vision blurred by tears and pain. That night, something inside Lisa broke. She could no longer pretend. The man she loved would never love her back. He would never change. And if she stayed, he would kill her. That's when the idea took root. Lisa had always believed she could never hurt him, no matter how much he hurt her. But as she sat in the darkness of their apartment, nursing her bruises, a new thought formed, a dangerous thought. What if she was the one who walked away this time? What if, instead of waiting for Damien to destroy her, she took control? The plan formed slowly, carefully. She knew Damien too well. He was reckless, arrogant. He underestimated her. He thought she was weak, and that would be his downfall. The next few weeks, Lisa played her role perfectly. She was the obedient girlfriend, the woman who would never leave. She cooked for him, doted on him, laughed at his cruel jokes. And when she suggested a weekend getaway to a remote cabin, a place where no one would hear his screams, he didn't suspect a thing. The night of their trip, she packed his favorite whiskey, knowing he would drink himself into oblivion. And he did. Lisa watched as Damien grew drowsy by the fire, his mind fogged with alcohol. She waited until he passed out, his breathing heavy, his body slack. Then she acted. But just as she reached for the knife hidden beneath the couch, his eyes snapped open. A sinister smirk curled his lips. "You thought you could fool me?" he slurred. "You really think you're smarter than me?" Lisa's blood ran cold. In an instant, Damien was on his feet, his hands around her throat. She gasped, clawed at his arms, but he was too strong. The room spun, her vision blurred. She thought it was the end. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw the fireplace poker. With the last ounce of strength she had, she reached for it and swung. A sickening crack filled the air. Damien staggered back, eyes wide in shock. Another swing, another crack, and he collapsed to the floor, motionless. Lisa stood there, panting, staring down at his lifeless body. For the first time in years, she felt free. But her victory was short-lived. A sudden noise made her freeze. A voice, cold and sharp, rang through the cabin. Well, it said. "Didn't expect that, did you?" Lisa turned, heart hammering. And there, standing in the shadows, was someone she never expected to see. The past had finally caught up with her. Lisa had spent years loving a man who never loved her back. She gave everything, her heart, her soul, her sanity, only to be met with cold indifference and cruel abuse. And in the end, she took matters into her own hands, ensuring that Ethan would never hurt her again. But murder has a way of staining the soul, and though Lisa had rid herself of the man who tormented her, the shadows of her actions lingered. Enter James. James had loved Lisa from a distance for years. He had watched her chase Ethan, watched her destroy herself in the name of love. He had always hoped that one day she would see him, the way he had always seen her. And now, with Ethan gone, he finally had his chance. First, it was everything Lisa had always dreamed of. James was kind, attentive, and unlike Ethan, he actually seemed to care. He showered her with affection, whispered sweet promises in her ear. He told her she was beautiful, that she was his world. For the first time in years, Lisa felt loved. But love built on blood is destined to rot, and it didn't take long for things to change. James knew what Lisa had done. He had figured it out almost immediately. The way she avoided questions, the way she flinched at the mention of Ethan's name, it was all too telling. But instead of running, instead of reporting her, James saw an opportunity. "You did it for love," he whispered one night as he traced a finger down her arm. And love is a powerful thing, but love also requires sacrifice. Lisa didn't understand at first. She thought James was simply trying to comfort her, to justify her actions. But soon, his words became commands. And his love, once sweet and tender, became something far more sinister. "Do this for me," he would say, "if you love me." And Lisa, desperate to hold onto the affection she had craved for so long, obeyed. Started small. James would ask her to cover for him, to lie for him. He convinced her to give him access to her finances, promising that he was only trying to protect her. Then came the isolation. James cut her off from the few friends she had left, convincing her that they were only trying to turn her against him. And Lisa, blinded by love, believed him. But James's love came with a price. And as Lisa sank deeper into his control, she realized she had traded one prison for another. One night, she overheard him on the phone. His voice was low, urgent. She caught fragments of his conversation: money, blackmail, a deal gone wrong. And then she heard her name. She'll do it. She has no choice. Panic surged through her veins. What had she gotten herself into? Lisa had killed once out of desperation. But James was different. He was calculated, manipulative. He was using her. And suddenly, she realized the terrible truth. James had never really loved her. He had only ever seen her as a weapon, a tool to be used and discarded. She had left one monster, only to fall into the arms of another. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She needed to get out. She needed to escape. But James was always watching, always listening. And when she tried to leave, he tightened his grip. "I know what you did," he reminded her. "I know everything. And if you even think about running, I'll make sure the world knows too." Lisa was trapped. She had played the role of a victim for so long. She didn't know how to be anything else. But deep down, a fire had begun to burn. She wouldn't let another man control her. She wouldn't be used. Not again. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form in her mind. James thought he had her under his thumb. He thought she was weak. He had no idea what she was capable of. But soon he would find out. The game wasn't over. Not yet. Lisa would make sure of that. Lisa had never felt this kind of exhaustion before. Bone deep, soul-crushing, and suffocating. The weight of her crimes, the nightmares of Ethan's lifeless body, and now the chains of James' suffocating control had drained every last bit of life from her. She had once killed for love, or at least the twisted version of love she had clung to. Now she realized she had simply been a pawn. First to Ethan's indifference, and now to James' sadistic pleasure. James had become everything she feared. a man even more controlling and cruel than Ethan had been. Only this time, there was no facade of affection, no illusion of tenderness. James didn't pretend to love her. He relished in the power he had over her. He knew everything, every chilling detail of how she had ended Ethan's life. He was the only one who held her secret, and he wielded it like a blade against her throat. Whenever Lisa even hinted at leaving, he would smirk, reminding her just how easy it would be to let the truth slip to the police. She was trapped, drowning in a sea of regret and longing for escape. Lisa knew one thing: she had to be free. She couldn't go on like this, being controlled, blackmailed, and used. But she also knew that as long as James was alive, her past would never stay buried. There was only one solution: James had to go. This time, she would be smarter. Lisa planned meticulously, ensuring there would be no mistakes. James was sharp, always a step ahead, but Lisa had learned from her past errors. She studied him, waiting for the perfect opportunity. He was arrogant and reckless, often underestimating her. That would be his downfall, or so she thought. The night she decided to strike, Lisa lured James to their secluded cabin under the pretense of a romantic getaway. She played the role of a remorseful lover, promising that she had been foolish for even thinking of leaving him. James, ever the egotist, drank up her words like the finest whiskey. He had always enjoyed control, and Lisa's supposed surrender only fed his dominance. But as the evening stretched into night, Lisa knew something was wrong. James was watching her too closely, his smirk a little too knowing. He wasn't drinking the wine she had carefully laced with a sedative. He barely touched his plate. Then he leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Nice try, darling, but I always see you coming." Lisa's blood ran cold. Before she could react, James grabbed her wrist, twisting it until she cried out in pain. He dragged her to the fireplace, where a laptop sat open. On the screen was a video feed, security footage of Lisa sneaking around the cabin earlier that evening, poisoning his drink. "You really thought you could outsmart me?" James laughed, shoving her down into a chair. "I knew you would try this, Lisa. I was counting on it." Lisa's breath came in short gasps. Her mind raced. He had set her up. He had been expecting her to make a move, and now he had all the evidence he needed to destroy her. James pulled out his phone. "The police will love this footage. They'll be very interested to hear how poor Ethan really died." Lisa lunged at him, but James was faster. He shoved her against the wall, pinning her there with ease. "Now, what should I do with you? Turn you in? Or make you my pet for a little while longer?" Lisa's body trembled, not with fear, but with rage. She would not let him win. Not again. Not ever. Summoning all the strength she had left, Lisa grabbed the lamp from the side table and smashed it into James' head. He stumbled, cursing, but he wasn't down. He came at her again, his hand wrapping around her throat. As her vision darkened, Lisa realized with horrifying clarity that she had lost. James had set the perfect trap, and she had walked straight into it. Her limbs grew weak, her struggles futile. Just as she thought the darkness would take her, she heard the distant wail of sirens. The sound was foreign, almost surreal. James' grip loosened. He cursed under his breath, turning toward the door. "The police!" Lisa gasped for air, collapsing to the ground. Through blurred vision, she saw James back away, panic flashing in his eyes. He turned to run, but it was too late. The front door burst open, officers swarming in with guns raised. "James Carter, you are under arrest. Hands where we can see them." Lisa's mind reeled. How had the police known? Then, out of the shadows, a familiar figure stepped forward. Detective Harris. Lisa's stomach twisted. "How?" Harris gave her a look of quiet triumph. "James isn't as smart as he thinks. He's been under investigation for months. And thanks to his own little setup, we have more than enough to put both of you away." Lisa's heart plummeted. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. James was dragged out in handcuffs, cursing and shouting that Lisa had planned everything, that she was the true mastermind. Lisa barely heard him. Her world was crumbling around her. She had lost. Again, as they cuffed her and read her rights, Lisa felt the crushing weight of her choices. There was no escape now, no more manipulation, no more control. Justice had finally caught up to her. As they led her to the police car, Lisa caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the window. The once vibrant, love-obsessed woman was gone. All that remained was a hollow shell, a cautionary tale of obsession, greed, and the inescapable hand of justice. The lesson was clear. Love, when twisted by obsession and cruelty, only leads to destruction. And in the end, no secret stays buried forever. As the car door slammed shut, Lisa closed her eyes, realizing that this was the end of her story, or perhaps just the beginning of her punishment.